Hey, folks, Miguel Perretti back here on the MMA Museum podcast. And if you've watched our recent segment on classic fights, you may recognize Pete Rodley. If you've been around since the 90s, you may recognize Pete Rodley from the MMA game. He's been around a long time, and I figured it's time to sit this man down and do the long form interview. Here's a guy who's going to give us a. Yeah, well, I'll tell you the real minute that I said I got to interview this guy was when we were watching the fight, the Fitch fight with Jocelyn, and I was talking about MMA in Canada, and you corrected me on some dates and how early it really went on and stuff like that, and I realized that you know more than me, which means I on the Canadian scene, right? So, which means we got to have you on. We got to find out and get these details recorded and
Yeah, we're
documented.
like two encyclopedias, me and you, man.
You
Yeah.
know, I've got gaps. Like I'm an encyclopedia that's missing like book 7, 9, 15. You know what I mean? I admit I'm not the be all
Comes with
end
the
all,
age.
but we try here. We just got done with a Brian
Yeah,
Johnson
man.
interview that's been really well received. Brian,
Nice, nice.
an American pioneer with the early UFCs, and
How's his health?
you know he had a stroke, so
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
he's
Yeah.
a he's still sharp as a tack. It didn't affect his mental state or memory or anything like that. But at times his speech is affected, and he didn't want to do the interview. And I said, I don't care. We have to do the interview. And
Mm-hmm.
um, here with you, I don't care that you know more than me about Canadian MMA. That's the point of the interview, is that we gotta get this stuff documented. So let's start from the very beginning. Pete, I know that tell people why they called you Wino.
Oh shit.
We'll start right
Okay.
there.
For one, I've never been a big drinker. Anyone who knows me knows I've never been a big drinker. That's the irony of it. My first business, I think I was like 22 years old. I said, hey, every time I go to Toronto and Burlington, the bigger centers in Southern Ontario, everywhere I go, there's one of these wine stores where you go in, you make 5 gallon batch, you go back and bottle it 2 months later, and it was like $3 a bottle, which even back then, and I'm talking like this was 93, 94. So I owned a winemaking store when I first got involved in NHB. It wasn't even called MMA back then. So I started tape trading. We can say that, eh? The statute of limitation or
What are they gonna
something.
do? They're
Yeah,
gonna
fuck it.
this.
Yeah.
They're gonna Rings is gonna sue me for trading Japanese videos. Come
Yeah,
on.
the IVCs. Sorry, Sergio. Yeah. So we'd be sending stuff all over. So everyone who got tapes from Pete Rodley in Canada got a little bottle of wine from my store. So ask Justin Lawrence down in Australia, Yamamoto, Brian out in BC. There was a dude everywhere. Half Head, remember Half Head down in
Yeah,
Florida? Yeah, I think he passed, eh?
that I
Yeah.
hadn't heard. I don't even think I could tell you what his real name was, but I remember the half heads.
I can, but I won't. It's a mafioso thing, you know. No, I'm
Okay,
kidding.
that's cool.
I'm kidding.
Well, what
So
we're
I would be sending everyone a bottle of wine, right?
sure.
Um, and so everyone just started calling me Wino. And then Jeff Osborne asked me to go and start filming some things and send it down to the Fight World Video Magazine. What was it called before that? Hook and Shoot Video
The Hook
Magazine
and Shoot
before that.
Video Magazine for sure.
So in the credits, it says, thank you, Wino, for the Canadian footage. And then
Yep.
everyone just started calling me Wino. And then I'd run into people like at a UFC back in the day or wherever I was, and they'd expect me to like go out and get plugged with them. It's like, well, I'll have one. They're like, what kind of fucking wino are you? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where wino came from. And I actually still have a couple of bottles. And when I had my shows, the first UCC events, I still have one. I'll take a picture and send it to you. It's I had the UCC logo, custom label on the red wine, and then every fighter that showed up, they got a bottle of red, a bottle of white, and a bottle of rosé. no matter what their taste. And everyone thought that was just so classy. And
It's a nice touch. It's a personal touch. And, when we were in the era of running
mhm,
smaller shows and you could do little things like that, that really does
yeah,
separate you. It gave you the positive reputation that, still lasts to this day.
yep,
On most of this tape trading and stuff happened on, at that point, most of the United States was discovering the internet with the phone connection, and most of the United States internet was America Online. Now, there's many different providers and it's all over the place. America Online is
mhm.
still out there, but America Online basically had 75%, I would guess,
Back then,
of
yeah.
the internet. And they did what basically amount to message boards. And that's where a lot of the information was
Hmm.
accounted for there. People give their address on the message board and the tapes arrive in a couple of days and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
people like Joe Silva, Joe Gold, they were all on there. Band Dog 7, if you remember Joel. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
so, um, so
There's a
yeah,
lot of people that ended up doing some heavy things, man. Like we all did. We all ended up having our contributions in some way. Some promoted, some ended up fighting. Joe and Silva ended up being like a matchmaker for UFC. Osborne did his thing. Justin, you did your thing. Huge contribution to the sport. I did my thing. And there was like maybe 20 of us that knew what this thing was.
yep.
Like I'm talking like fuck, it was
I
crazy.
I'll tell a story from those boards to give people an inkling of what was going on. And there was a kid who was a fighter named Ryan Apollinario that was on the boards. I know the name sounds familiar to you, but Ryan was a kid. He fought. I don't think he made it to the top level or is somebody who's super famous and stuff. But he would train and he would train. At that point in the 90s, if you had a couple of submissions, you were very superior to just about anybody. Bring your
Hmm.
classmates over and stuff. And he actually came on the boards one day and said, I just had 10 challenge matches against classmates and I beat them all. So now I'm 10-0. And his record went to like 70-0 because he was doing challenge matches against untrained people in his. And this is, I was like, this is how fake records get made or
Everyone
constructed.
was doing that back then, though.
Yeah.
Everybody, man.
And here's
Like,
here's the interesting catch. If you look back at history, because of that reputation from the boards, Ryan Apollinario actually competed in the Abu Dhabi trials. I'm sorry, in the Abu Dhabi the first year, I believe.
wow.
And when he went over there, I think he lost in the first round. I don't think he got through, for real there. But yeah, there were all kinds of characters on the America Online boards. Um, but
Yep, there's
when we
guys that still owe me money for tapes.
yeah,
Who is that guy? Oh, he was with the Lions Den. Quick Swick, Mike
okay,
Swick.
Mike Swick.
Yeah, yeah, man. He was just going to train at the Lions Den, and he put a thing up. He's like, "Yeah, I got an offer to fight so and so in IFC or King of the Cage or Gladiators, whatever the hell it was." So he asked, "Who's got this event, this event?" So I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I got it. I'll send you a bunch of tapes. Just get me back." So I sent him like 15 tapes that he used to train.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you see this, yeah, you still owe me $60, motherfucker.
I gotta admit, as a matchmaker at Hook and Shoot, I with my tape collection, I would make sure that guys would get a tape of their opponent if it was possible.
Yes.
And I thought that was my nice touch because it lets them decide if they're in the ball game or not, without
Yeah,
talking,
yeah,
without
yeah.
with watching and things. So um I think that's kind of what separated us in the early days in terms of matchmaking and in terms of quality of
Hmm.
shows and stuff was that we had a reputation for taking it seriously. Jeff, Osborne was a guy that definitely one of the early philosophers of the sport about how to go about, conducting a show and the real fights and things like that. So he was a great guy to work with for all that
Hmm.
stuff, and he gave me a lot of carte blanche. Once he figured out I kind of knew my thing too, um, we stayed out of each other's way, so to speak, or else I think he probably would have killed me.
Nah, Jeff's a big teddy bear.
Yeah, but I'm humble enough to say he'll kick my ass. So and I probably deserved it at some points, at certain times. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
he was on that original forum too.
that's true.
See, a lot of guys that are
He
going
was
to
hook and
listen.
shoot.
Well, yeah, for sure. So a lot of guys that are hearing this once it comes out, they're going to be like, "Oh, you're talking about when the underground first started?" No,
No, this
way
is
before. This
woo.
was a mailing list, dude. This
Yeah,
was a mailing list. So you email, what was it, NHB at something something or something like that, and then it automatically goes to 20 people, and that forms a thread. So you reply to it, so everyone who replied to it gets a reply. Then you have this discussion, and
yeah.
it
And
was just
literally,
amazing.
you plug in your phone line, from your hard phone. It's funny. I do phone work now, and every once in a while, I've been calling people, and I get an older person, and I can tell they have an old phone. They just slammed the phone down because it really felt good in those days to just slam the phone down, and you can't
Loved it.
that's been so lost. You know what I mean? But you would plug
Yeah,
your phone line in, and the computer would make the phone connection noise.
sounds like a fax or
Yeah,
something. Yeah,
while you're getting online, and that's was the first place. And like you said, a lot of people that did notable things in the sport, and I think that it was a congregation of people that they found a passion. And I think that that's what the important thing was. Now, in your
yeah.
case, in Canada, there are different points in history where Canada becomes very important to the world picture of MMA. One of
Mhm.
them is is Harold Howard the first Canadian competitor in the UFC?
In the UFC,
Yes.
yes, but not Canadian competitor.
Yeah,
Like there were other
but what
guys
was
before that.
what was going on in MMA before Harold was seen in the UFC? What was going on in NHB in Canada?
Well, there was some underground pancration stuff going on just north of Toronto. Highly illegal, so I'm not going to mention names and locations, but oh, excuse me, those were going on. Before Harold got involved, there was John Perretti came up and he helped out with some people that I later worked with there, Victorio and whatnot, and did the extreme fighting, the battlecade,
Yep.
the one where the government tried to shut it down, and
They moved
oh,
it to an Indian reservation and everybody got arrested afterwards.
that's where it had to be. It
Yeah.
had to. It was no ifs, ands, or buts. Like they couldn't do it anywhere else. And that was Mike Thomas. That was in Kanawaki,
Yeah.
which is about just a stone throw outside of Montreal. And
Yeah.
that's where I got my start.
And I believe
Yeah.
that was Extreme Challenge or Extreme Fighting 3. It was the third edition of Perretti's show.
Mm-hmm.
He had done a couple in the States and then went north of the border. And, Perretti is a guy
Mm-hmm.
that, people are forgetting, but he was a guy, he was so far advanced and so far ahead of the game
Mm-hmm.
in terms of
Mm-hmm.
concept and things like that. Um, just to give people an inkling of the guy, so the fight show goes down. The Canadian authorities
Mm-hmm.
are incredibly upset, and they show up at the hotel and start arresting people. Fighters got arrested. The referee got arrested. Um, I've heard a story of Ralph Gracie was outside of the hotel, saw the cops start showing up, and took off. So Ralph didn't get arrested, but some of the fighters spent some time in jail. And the word was that Perretti had gotten out of the country and flew back to be arrested with the guys. So if that's a true rumor, what do you know? What insight can you tell us? I think you're
Oh
right.
man, I know a lot about that show, not much about the arrests. I know that there was one fighter, a UFC vet, that was supposed to fight on there, and word was that the RCMP or the Popo was going to show up. So Orlando Wheat got knocked out by
Okay.
Remco Pardue at the elbows there.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He was like, "Screw this shit, I'm out of here," and he dipped out. And Perretti on camera reamed him, reamed
Yeah.
him.
Perretti
What
isn't a
kind
guy
of?
who's
Oh, he and I we got along great. Like
Yeah.
we're yeah, very, very similar.
Yeah, he's not going to hold back on anybody, though. I've seen him
No.
cut loose on people. I remember a scene much later on where he wasn't a fan of
Mhm.
Carlos Barreto. I don't know if you remember the Brazilian Barreto,
Of course, of
and
course.
he sat Barreto down, got a translator, and the first words out of his mouth was, "Tell him he's not in the UFC because he sucks." Yeah. So Perretti was not one to mince words. I'll tell you.
Yeah, but I don't know, not to cut you off, but I don't know if there was actual arrest though
Oh
after.
no, they
I
absolutely were, because I'll tell you how I know. In many future years, I got to work with John Donahue, who was the referee for that event.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We were both judges for Abu Dhabi for years together,
yeah.
and John was in jail, for a couple of days there.
Wow.
And so were some of the fighters that got caught up, and you know, eventually they got out there. But John um called Gene LaBelle to tell him he was in jail, and Gene told his wife, and he had concocted a different story for his wife. So that's the story that John told me. You can look up the John Donahue interview here on the MMA
That's
podcast
awesome,
as well.
man.
John is
That's
a
awesome.
absolute pioneer out of Australia, since we're talking about
Hmm.
the old days. And here's the interesting thing about John Donahue is one of the very few Gene LaBelle black belts. So the insight that man has from the very beginning, unmatchable. And then he
Yeah, you got
confirmed.
a Gene LaBelle black belt in your real deal. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough when he said, "Oh, I need a body up here," and I was like, "Okay, okay." Jesus Christ. Turning me this way. I'm tapping. He's giggling like a little girl. It's like, shit, man. Can I at least get an autographed picture out of this deal? I was like 24 years old. But yeah, the Kanawaki thing where the extreme thing happened, I'm glad you started there because that's kind of where on this end of Canada. On the other end, you had Canada's Western Toughest or something it was called, and Jason Dara was involved in it.
And I
Bunch of
know, I
OG.
know you don't want to throw out names and stuff like that, but let's be honest. And I'm not Canadian, but I got to live in Canada for a little while. And one of the things I noticed about Canadian culture is that the biker groups are even more powerful than really in the United States, where the United States, you got to you got to keep those people with respect. You got to watch out for them because they carry certain weight. In Canada, they
Mhm.
carry even more weight, and a lot of them were the guys that backed these types of fights back then. Is that
Backed. A lot of
correct?
them were promoting. A lot of them were on the athletic committee. Yeah, I won't get into much with it, but I always had great experiences with them. Like I would do my freedom fight events down in the Ottawa market in the nation's capital, and I would get a call from the Prez. He would take me out for dinner at the Hard
Yeah,
Rock. He would purchase a few grand worth of VIP tickets. And for me, it was like free security. I
yeah.
never had any issues at my shows. If there was ever a problem, I just look at a certain person and wink, and then they would put the fire out for me. I never had a problem. But as far as
Yeah, just don't
that was that.
don't go back on your word to a biker. But if you're a man of your word, and they're usually men of their word, you can
Yeah,
do
man.
you can do business. You know what I mean? And they
Yeah,
definitely were enablers for a lot of those early shows.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And they actually hosted. I don't know if in your 1,000 VHS collection like I have, do you have the what the hell were they called? Biker tent tumble in
Okay,
British Columbia. Do you have those?
I don't have 10 tumble anymore. I remember the name of the event, and hearing about that.
I got them all, man, and they were on like right on biker territory. They had this ring set up. It looked like, you ever watch like the Little Rascals when you were a kid when Spanky was boxing and the fucking rings falling apart. It looked just like that. Like people were holding the ring together. That was their job, was to stand in the corner. Guys in like jean shorts, and there was some brutal stuff. So
Yeah,
that was the start. The start out there in BC was more jujitsu based outside of the whole biker thing, because you had guys like Lance Gibson, Matt Hume had ties up there, which meant, a lot of other people would be going up. I think Barnett was involved, Josh Barnett was involved. So, and that really blossomed, but it never got huge. like it did here. There was never any huge events, but great events where
Yeah.
it started a lot of people. I know a lot of promoters out there. And while we're on the topic of out there, we lost somebody a couple days ago, an OG fighter who I had the privilege of working with, goes way back, but I just wanted to say RIP, rest in peace, Travis Galbraith, the Gladiator. He
Okay.
fought in the UCC. He fought George St. Pierre on my show. Recently passed away. So I just want to send out my best of vibes to his family and everybody there.
Yeah,
But
every once in a while, the news and the problem with that kind of news is it's going to come more often. You know what I mean? As we all start to go, so it's always sad for me to hear that on the UFC end. We recently lost. Oh, what was the name of the boxer with the one glove? Art Jimerson.
Art Jimison, yeah,
Yeah,
I
he
saw
recently
that as
passed away
well.
as recently, and there have been a lot of people that you want to talk about uh, old school guys and jujitsu type guys from the Vancouver area.
Mm.
Also passed away was oh, what's his name? Jason. He fought Guy Mesger in the UFC in the hair pulling match.
Jason Farron, he passed
J-
away.
Jason Farron has passed. Yeah.
God damn, man.
And
Fuck, he was young.
yeah, he wasn't old, and it's been a few years since then. So
Wow, I never heard that. That was the hair pulling fight. Remember
yeah,
they had a gentleman's agreement not to
yeah,
pull each other's gay little ponytails they had?
yeah. It's so funny because Jason was a legitimate tough guy from the early days.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He was responsible for training fighters like Lee Remedios in future years and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And
Mm-hmm.
but I remember Jason was one of those guys that also got beat up on the underground, and in terms of and by the underground I mean the America Online boards and things like that. In terms of they did not treat him with respect or treat him
Well, they
well.
didn't know. They thought he was some fanboy with a ponytail and blah, blah, blah. And then that was an issue back then, just like now. There
Yeah,
were trolls. We had trolls back then.
for sure. I
I remember
remember
wanting to smash people. Like,
since he
damn.
passed away, I don't want to bring it up, but it's kind of too funny to not bring up. Somebody did, and this is the 90s, so Photoshop wasn't as sophisticated as now, but someone did a fantastic picture of him with the gi with a big black patch down the side that they had replaced the bad boy logo with the Tampax logo.
I remember that.
It's brutal.
Wow. Yeah, back in the day. So we had that going on out there where we were. We
What
had the
about the middle of
extreme.
Canada? Because like in future years, like
Way after. We'll get to that.
oh,
There was
okay,
nothing going on there, man. No MFCs, no KOTC. Lee Mean wasn't doing his great shows, which he's still at it, that old awesome dude. So
because
yeah, so you
later
had
there
the
were great fighters out of the middle of Canada as well.
hell yeah,
So well,
Lethbridge, Jason McDonald. Yeah, we can go
Jason
on and on
McDonald,
about all
McDonald
them.
was one of my boys. He fought several times for me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
Great guy, man. So in
yeah, fantastic.
Kanawaki, where the Battlecade thing, we'll get back to that. That sort of sparked a seed. Okay, how can the natives make it legal? Well, there's a thing called a BCR. It's a band council resolution, which on the reserves, basically they can create their own laws. So if they have a BCR, a band council resolution, and they're say, okay, we deem this legal on our territory, there's nothing the cops can do. So the first show I went to was in 97-ish, something like that. And Jeff asked me to go down and cover this underground event on a reserve. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. What the hell? My wife at the time thought I was insane. So I show up with my 150-pound video camera on my shoulder. Good thing I was a lot bigger back then. And I show up at the arena. I don't know anyone. Like I'm just a kid just starting out, right? So I go up to the security. I see a guy with an IFC shirt. And I'm like, yeah, where's Mike Thomas? I'm supposed to get my press pass from him. Oh yeah, Mike had to take off, but go down to the cage. Walk on in, go down to the cage, and Jeremy's got them. So I'm walking around looking for some dude named Jeremy. So I walk down to the cage, and there's Jeremy Horn in the cage with all the passes. He gave them to him, who was fighting in the main event. He fought a guy named Todd Broadway that night. And
Both
yeah, took
both
off
hook
my
both hook
shoes
and
and
shoe
my very
veterans.
yeah, oh yeah, Jeremy and Travis was fighting on that.
I'll tell you a great Todd Broadway story. A fantastic Todd Broadway story. Okay, he won the 4-man tournament in the early days of hook and shoe, and did
Yes.
some fighting and stuff, and then kind of faded away. In 2007, when Bodog was at its height, and we were in Costa Rica. We were hosting 36 fights, 12 fights a day for 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
And Todd Broadway was the corner man for another fighter. And I recognized him and I knew him and stuff like that. And the long and short of it is that after a 10-year retirement, or probably thereabouts, I had a fighter that came down with vertigo. And what was the name of the French fighter who was 185 pounds in the UFC? Really good looking guy, a black fighter. He was down in Costa Rica for a fight, and his opponent got vertigo. And they had spent 2 weeks in Costa Rica doing the filming and stuff like that. And he said to me, he goes, dude, you got to get me a fight. How do you just get a fight out of nowhere? And Todd Broadway stepped up and did that fight after all that retirement. Much respect
How
to that
much
guy.
notice?
Probably about 3 days. About
Yeah, but
three
that
days.
shit was normal back then, bro. That was
2007,
normal.
we were hoping by 2007 it'd be a little more organized. I'll be honest, it
Hell
doesn't
no.
in the scope of things, it doesn't really matter. But at Bodog, we did everything: medicals, CAT scans, everything. Broadway, we just said stick him in there. Yeah. There was no boxing commission, so
Yeah, no, that was a good time. But on that show, speaking of the old days, this is going way back before 2008, 2007. But Travis was fighting. Travis Fulton, rest in peace, was fighting on that show as well. He really liked my wine. I'll tell you that. Ooh, side note, holy shit. But he was fighting Christophe Midou
oh
from Nice,
gosh.
France. Yeah, man. Yeah. So he and it's really funny because they see me and they're like, "Oh, you speak English. Guess what? You're going to be in our corner." So my first show, I'm there videotaping and whatnot, did my interviews. You watch the video and I'm walking into the cage with Jeremy Horn and Travis Fulton. My first show ever,
That's
like
so
trial by
cool.
fire. So if you watch the video, Travis is limping like a gazelle that just got attacked by a lion. He's limping the whole way into the cage. So I'm like, afterwards, I was like, what the fuck? He's all, oh yeah, this is his 7th fight in 1 week.
Yeah.
That was the week that he flew and he won. What was that promoter? They used to call him the prick, but I really liked him. Frederico Lapenda. He had WVC. He
Okay.
won. Remember when he won the WVC tournament? And
Fulton.
then
Yeah.
he went and he won a tournament for Monty in those square cages he had in Iowa. I think that was the night of the Jeremy Bullock choke slam, the legendary
Well,
choke
that
slam.
fight was in Utah then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, either way, he won 2 8-man tournaments. And then him and Jeremy hopped in a car and drove to Canada to fight Christophe Midou and dominated and destroyed him. It was
Wow.
like, wow.
Midou's a serious guy. I looked it up while we were here. The guy Todd Broadway fight, for UFC fans, he fought on 3 days' notice after a 7-year retirement, was Francis Carmont. If you
Oh,
remember,
geez, really?
yeah, who was not who was turned out to be an excellent UFC level fighter. Not just a good fighter
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Francis Carmont was the real deal,
Yeah,
but for
man.
a little while. So that's who he fought on. Like I said, I'm going to look up the that date was 2007, and he hadn't fought since 2000. So after a 7-year retirement, on 3 days' notice, he stepped in to fight Francis Carmont.
And you know what? He probably didn't come in and say, okay, I need 20 grand. I need 25 grand. Like, he probably
And
did okay.
yeah, I'll tell you, we gave him 5,000. And when he came in as a corner man to go home with 5,000 extra bucks, he said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And respect to him for not trying to negotiate more money or looking into it and stuff like that. And the guy who he was cornering fought Pele Landy.
Jesus.
So we were
You guys
definitely,
had Pele and Bodog? Wow.
yeah, yeah. I know Pele very well because I I took Henry Matamoros to fight in Brazil. Matamoros was actually Rafael Cordeiro's last MMA fight, and
Wow.
he went 30 minutes with him, and those guys won a lot of respect for Henry. Pele actually helped me corner Henry at one of Jamie Levine's shows in the future. And the other interesting thing about Pele is a lot of people don't know this, but for the historians out there, Pele's not Brazilian; he's Cuban. So I speak fluent Spanish, and so does he. So it was very easy for us to communicate
Mm.
introduce. He's living in New Jersey now. I've talked to him about doing an interview. We may actually do a Spanish language interview and try to transcribe it, see how it goes, because he's a
Oh, wow.
talk about one of the absolute legends. But
Absolute. I used to love his fights. Him, that the series with Macaco.
yeah, with
Um,
Macaco, with uh, uh Joel
man.
de Oliveira,
Yeah, man.
serious stuff.
They
Um,
don't have rivalries like that anymore. They don't have that mystique. Everyone looks the same, talks the same, acts the same tattoos, same, and everyone knows the same skills. And it's like, shit, man, where'd the mystique go? When you can just walk in an arena and you have one of your idols holding your media pass, and
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
next thing you know, you're cornering them and giving them wine to bring home, and I miss that stuff, man. So I ended up Mike Thomas, but going back to the IFC in Kanawaki, the promoter that got it legalized on the reserve, I ended up helping him on 3 shows. He labeled me, he even made me a little business card, labeled me the Ontario representative to the IFC. So basically, I quickly formed friendship with the first, can't even call it MMA, but an NHB club where they did Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. First one, as far as I know, in this whole end of Canada. There was like one in BC and one here, Shaw Franco Academy. Professor Shaw Franco, awesome guy. And he was under Silvio Baring. So
Okay.
it was Baring Jiu Jitsu in Toronto. And they had, I go down there and I met guys like Richard Nanku. I met guys like Sean Pearson,
Yeah.
uh, Justin Brockman, all guys that held my belts years
And,
later.
and for jujitsu people, especially modern jiu-jitsu people who may not recognize the Bearing name, you're talking about guys who all got their black belts from Rickson Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to look it up, I believe that it may have even been Silvio Bearing who gave Fabrizio Werdun his black belt. That Werdun is definitely one of the Bearings. I'm not sure if it was Silvio, but it very well might have been. Yeah, they took their jiu-jitsu branch to Spain and were teaching in Europe for many years. So
Cool.
the Bearings are similar to, you've got the Gracies, you've got the Machados, and the Bearing
Mm-hmm.
name is right in that mix as far as
Absolutely.
early pioneers in that early diaspora of jiu-jitsu out of Brazil.
Yep.
But
Yep. And no
take us
ego. No ego. Just a funny. I could tell you, I can't tell this story on air because it's people think less of me. But but my pop was there. He was still alive. And you know what? F it. I'll tell a quick story. All right. It's the after party. And this guy, Barry McDonald, they used to call him Mac Daddy Flex. And this little guy, muscular, funny, crazy dude. Anyhow, he found a cell phone. So he decides to go through the cell phone. And they didn't lock back then, and he finds the number dad. So he calls the number's dad and basically played it like, yeah, I have your son's cell phone because we kidnapped him. He's in the trunk. Imagine getting a call like this. And it's 3 in the morning. We're all lit like light bulbs in the hallway of the hotel. And me and Silvio Baron were laughing so hard, I almost upchucked. I was laughing. And he's on the phone. And he said, this guy's poor dad is freaking out. Oh, I don't care. I'm a lawyer. I'll give you $500,000 right now. No, 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 no. It's about honor. It's not about money. And he has the poor guy going on and on and on and on. Then he hangs up. And then the father in me comes out. And I'm like, you should probably call this guy back. Eh? So he calls him back, leads him on for another 15, 20 minutes. While me, Silvio, and my father, we're in the hallway and we're like kid, you would never know. My dad was a 10th Dan grandmaster. I was the promoter guy, Silvio, and here we are, literally on the floor laughing. I'll always, always, always remember that, man. And just, oh, this silliness.
Yeah,
Okay, we got derailed with stupidity there for a
no,
second.
but it's a lot of fun, and it goes to show because you mentioned they're not rivalries like that anymore, and the camaraderie is also something I think is missing. Of
Oh,
at the end
big
of the
time.
day, so I think it's a very nice, interesting story with good names involved in it, to lead into the next segment here, which takes us to UFC legend Harold Howard. Now,
Okay.
Harold, um, I believe it was UFC 3, right? That he popped up in. So he's one of the
Roland
yeah,
Payne was
yeah.
first fight.
So maybe it was UFC 2, or maybe it was 3, but it was, we could look that up. But
It was
uh,
three. The one with Emo, Hoist
uh,
Gracie couldn't finish, and
okay,
Steve Denham, the
so you
alternate
so
Emo.
you were there. Talk about your relationship with Harold, because Harold's not a guy that you know did a lot of press or extended his career and was all over the place or anything like that. It looks like he went back to Canada and did his own thing and stuff like that. But you knew him well before and know him since.
Way before, way before. I met Harold when I was 11 years old. When I first moved to Canada, he was part of the circle of black belts. He was under a guy named Pappy, Sensei Steve Reynolds, who recently passed away. Dangerous guy from Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. So Harold was one of his black belts. He also had a black belt under my pop in Goju, and he lived in Niagara Falls. So he was like the circle of family. We had all these black. My family, when I moved from New York to Canada, were all black belts, and they were all nuts. They were all nuts, and anyone that was there will testify to that. There's a reason I turned out the way I did. Oh yeah, I'm not to blame. Um, but Harold was always over the top, always. And I used to call my mom Ali Baba, and that was my mom's name is Alice. So he would come up and train and train hard, man. And and even in a bar setting, I've seen him do horrible things, like hospitalized 3 people without getting out of his like toughest guy that as far as I was concerned at the time, Harold was the toughest man on earth, or at least in Canada. Like nobody. The shit that I and he trained me a little bit as well. And then one day he calls and he goes, "Yeah, you're not going to believe this, Pete, but this little Brazilian dude came into my dojo and challenged me to this cage thing, no holds barred, bare knuckle." My first thought was, this guy's going to die. I didn't know about Gracie's or jujitsu, that. And my second thought was, "Are you going to go to jail for this?" And he said, "No, it's legal." And I remember my exact response. I rolled my eyes to him. I said, "Yeah, right. It's legal." I said, "Okay, there's a special guest referee, Hulk Hogan or Roddy Piper." Like, shut up. There's no fucking way you're going to go in a cage, bare knuckle, and step on someone's face. And no, and he come up to train at our place, the home dojo where we did the other one. And he showed myself and my folks a little 8 millimeter tape that it was either Art Davy or Horion gave him to train. And I've had a chub ever since, man. He showed me that video, and I looked over at my folks. I said, every answer about martial arts is being answered right now that I had. This is what I will do for the rest of my professional career. And I did. But Harold, so he trained for it. UFC 3, when you're not many people had camps like they do now. You don't have a fight camp. You there's a 8-man tournament. You don't know who you're fighting. So he knew he was fighting a Thai guy. Okay, whatever. You don't need to train for that. He'll kill him, which he did. Um, but you can't really, back then, as you remember very well, you can't, oh yeah, I'm going to go to this place and train jujitsu. I'm going to do this. So his training was just cardio and quite frankly, just partying a lot. Like, and then he goes in there and then he competes and he whoop Roland's ass, and then he gets his ass kicked by a cop that he outweighed by 30 pounds. And I was like, oh, this shit is for real.
Yeah.
Okay. This is for real.
Now,
Um,
you were with him then.
at the UFC, no, but
Oh,
good friends of mine were. John Anderson was there. I forget that manager guy that was jumping around in that silly
uh,
jumpsuit.
Charlie
Esposito.
Ancelone.
Angelo, yeah, yeah. I still don't know his tie-in with all that, man. I know his face appeared.
Charlie was an upstate New York guy that uh, he was a mover and a shaker. He was also in the kickboxing world, so he got a lot of people in there. And what he
Mm,
did, one of his political moves too, was he was good friend. He became friends with Art Davies. So Art, the matchmaker at Ground Zero. Sometimes you're like, at that point, it's like literally where are you going to get guys to fill these tournaments? And Ancelone was a guy who could get him guys. What was the name of the big
Kevin,
Kevin
my homie, man, he passed away too.
Kevin
I,
Rozier.
I,
Yeah,
yeah, I was his corner man for his last fight, the IFC in on Kanawaki,
yeah.
and I almost got banned from the reserve for life because I swung at the referee, and I felt bad. It was Andy Anderson was the referee,
Awesome, awesome.
and we had a strategy. I've seen Kevin take a baseball bat to the head and look at the guy and say, you just got me hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, Kevin was
So,
real deal.
like
So he tried
Rozier,
to.
yeah, Rozier was the guy I think that was Anselm's first arrival into the UFC, and then he was a guy that knew how to play the game. So he made friends
Mm-hmm.
with everybody and made friends with the Anderson, Andy, and the Southern guys too. That they all had little networks of people there.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
but yeah, so Harold, um, in the in between time, and this is one of those things that sometimes still gets talked about, is he fought Hoist Gracie, but didn't fight Hoist Gracie. So
That was the whole goal of him going there, was to test himself against Royce Gracie. Because by the
and,
time it come time to go, he was like, "Oh, now I know what the Gracies are." So he wasn't scared. He wanted to test himself.
and the controversy, the what that happened there is that Gracie ran into a very difficult fight with Chemo. I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you a story that Chris Brennan told me. Chris was one of the early guys
Mm-hmm.
from the jiu-jitsu community in California.
Great
He
ears.
Chemo, yeah, absolutely, serious
Well,
years, and also um, his second generation of kids fighting in Bellator and things like that are also the real deal. So Chris Brennan is much respect, but Chris
yeah.
was part of a group. So Chemo paid a guy to take private lessons from Rickson Gracie in preparation for this fight. And the guy would go to lessons with Rickson Gracie and come and show Chemo what was going on. So if
No
you
kidding.
no, for sure. So if you
I
can
didn't know
see,
that.
you can see Chemo has some awareness of what was going on in that fight,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he puts it to Hoist. Hurts him. Chemo also had some of his hair pulled out because you were allowed to pull hair in those days,
Mm-hmm.
and Hoist eventually got him, but Hoist was not able to continue.
That is how Hoist got it, because
Yeah,
of the hair.
right. And
Yeah.
here's the controversy now. There are alternates. Why did Hoist enter the ring against Harold and throw the towel in? Because Harold got a bye, and in many ways, there are some people that think that actually gives Harold a win over Hoist Gracie. He threw the towel in.
Well,
Um,
it technically was a win. On
hey,
paper, that
I,
technically is a win.
and he goes forward. But I
Um,
think if you look at the records that they give him a no contest or something along those lines, it's
wasn't
not
a no contest. The
it,
fight never.
it,
No, it wasn't a
it
no.
Hoist.
That could be. That's a whole nother show. What actually happened was they weren't sure how Hoist would react. He said, "Let me go out there and see how I feel." He went out there, went in the cage, turned, put his arms over the top of the cage, put his head down, and his father was right in front of him. And he says, I can't breathe, I can't see, I'm not doing it. And as a father, he didn't want his son to get killed. So he threw in the towel.
Yeah,
And then Harold, everyone was like, what's he pissed about? He got off easy. He just wanted to test himself. Like as soon as the towel went in, you could hear him. Fuck. And he punches the cage and goes storming out with his wife beater shirt and all pissed off. And that's why he was pissed off, because he simply wanted to test himself. And that is the headspace of what we were talking about earlier: rivalries, warriors. Oh, $200 to fight a guy that outweighs me $50, and you just changed my opponent. Sure, let's go.
yeah. Let's see
Let's
what
go.
happens.
What are
And
the
and
rules? There are none. Okay, cool. Like,
yeah, no,
yeah.
for
So
sure.
that's the story with that, and then
Now
yeah,
Harold, after that first taste, though, now Harold, as you said, came from the stand-up background, and now he's seeing the ground game and seeing what goes on there and stuff like that. And Harold is a guy that I don't want to say he's a little crazy, but maybe he's a little crazy. You know what I mean?
insane. Say it. Say it.
So
Even back in the day, I seen this man chase a freaking bear down the road into the forest with his bare feet and no shirt. And I'm like, Harold, it's a bear. What are you doing? Like me and him used to go smelt fishing, and we would go, and the tradition was you grab a handful of them and you bite all their heads off in the sink. Like, oh yeah, the shit we used to do. I can't even say because my mom's aware of some of it, but it was insanity. I've been at karate tournaments where he'd go against someone like point karate, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And I'd be in his corner with him, and I could tell when he got that look in his eyes, that wasn't a show. When he got that look on his eyes, get out of there. Get the hell out of there. So he's in the ring, and this guy, the referee would say mate, which is stop, and the guy would late shot him. Boom. After the referee says stop. So he did it once. Harold, okay, shit happens. Did it again. Harold steps back like this. He looks at me, and I'm shaking my head like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. There's kids here. And then he does it a third time, and he gives me a look, and I just put my hands in the air. I was like, fuck, here we go. So the referee, are you ready? Are you ready? And they had like the what do you call the hand pads? The
mhm,
karate gloves.
yeah.
He takes the Velcro on his other arm like that, so it's nice and loose. Referee says go. He throws the glove off his hand, punches this fucking guy so hard it looked like a condom full of marbles. Bro, hanging. I'm like, oh my god, dude. Like, and this was at like a point karate tournament, man. And then it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
he definitely had that edge, but he always had that balance where, if he saw a little old lady that needed help, he was the big scary dude that would literally pick her up and do whatever, man. He was always so kind to me, very kind to my parents, his
Well,
family.
I think a lot of guys like that too. Here's a part of it too is you're talking about a point karate tournament. You also talked a little bit about bar fighting and things like that. I think he was probably more suited to something like bar fighting, like a little bit like a little like uh, maybe the first Tank Abbott style, where in complete chaos you want Harold
Mm-hmm.
Howard on your side. That's kind of one of the things I always
Mm-hmm.
saw about him. So what did he think after his first UFC experience? Like, was he like, "This is I was born for this"?
No,
Did he enjoy
no.
what? To talk about that.
He enjoyed the experience. He liked being able to test himself, despite what a lot of people might think. There was a lot of ego back then, but it wasn't like, oh, that guy beat me, blah, 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 blah. He was like, wow, okay, I'm going to learn from this. Unfortunately, excuse me. Unfortunately, he didn't. His next two fights, he went and fought Mark Hall, who's also gone, I believe. Great guy. And Hall just toyed him, put him on his back, bloodied him up a couple minutes, and then he goes and fights Hugo Dante in Japan. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. And then that was it. That was his NHB career. That was it. It
Now,
was
did
done.
he? Because you know him and stuff like that. Was he unsatisfied by it? Was it something that, always left him a question as to what he would do, or did he just put it behind him? Or
No, because don't forget, by then he was pushing 40. So he
okay,
was already world champion, and he did sport jujitsu. He didn't do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but he was multiple black belt. He was a Canadian jiu-jitsu champion, believe it or not. So he already had his accolades. He had his gym, and quite frankly, by then there were a lot of other factors that needed his focus. You know what I mean? Family stuff. Um, yeah, I think it was okay. I tried that. I did win one fight. Well, technically two. Wink,
hmm
wink. And and yeah,
I,
no,
I respect that, because here's the bottom line: is if you are among the very few human beings who have ever won a UFC fight, you are now just one. You are among
actually back then,
a 0.00001% of the world
one
population. You are,
percenter they call it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Harold definitely got. I'm not crapping on his achievements. I do sort of wonder that if we had gotten him younger and we had gotten him focused, if we could have seen
Ooh,
yeah,
yeah.
something new, something different. You know what I mean? It didn't
The
go that way.
Harold from when I was a teenager to the Harold when I was a young 20 something is when he fought in the UFC. Oh yeah, when he was 25, 26, if this stuff was out and give him a couple of years to learn the jits and then oh yeah, because he was like 6'3", 245, natural,
Yeah, he was
yeah.
athletic for the time. I mean, people make fun of the wife beater now and stuff like that, but that flip kick he tried in that fight and
Uh,
stuff like that, not
and
every
we told
big
him,
guy.
don't do that. We told him, don't do that. This isn't a point karate tournament. That was his thing. And he's actually landed that kick where he flips. That's what that is. It's a kick and you land
Yeah,
with your heel. Boom, boom,
yeah, kind of like an axe kick on steroids kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, right. But we told him, dude, don't do that. This is real deal. So what does he do? He goes in and does the flip. It's like shit. Yeah, and then after that, he come up for a couple of our camps. Like we host a martial arts camp every year, outdoor training. You would love it, man. You would love it. And he come up for a couple of those, and then yeah, just you know, people
Yeah,
drift.
yeah, he was older. He just said he was 40 or closing in on 40 in the UFC, and that's not the right time to get into that. You know what I mean? Especially as history has shown us, it is a young man's sport at this point. And
Back
it's
then, there were no young men to do it, though. You
right.
look at the first few
No,
UFC.
Hoist was in his 20s.
Hoist was in his 20s,
You
but
know,
Shamrock was early 30s.
yeah, and you get
Kevin Rozier was pushing 50 or 40.
40.
Harold was pushing
Mark Hall
40.
was older.
Mark
Every guy,
Hall,
I wonder how old Jenham was, but Jenham was probably, he was already a cop with his career and stuff like that.
34, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
nice guy. Nice
yeah,
guy.
for sure. The first young guys that we saw were really like Jerry Bolander, guys like that. But
Jason DeLucia. Jason DeLucia
yeah,
was the wonder kid.
yeah.
And
And
this guy, he was nuts. He was nuts. He truly, before UFC, he's the guy that would go into the Torrance Academy and do the challenge fights.
oh,
When
yeah,
he fought Royce in the UFC, that was
they'd
actually the
already
second
fought.
or third time that yeah, you know the deal.
Yeah.
You've seen the
I interviewed
videotape, and
Jason. I interviewed Jason.
that would
And
that would be an interview. I'd love to see that.
yeah, it's on the other podcast, the Lights Out podcast. I don't mind you going
Okay.
out to see it because it was one of our better jobs. When we get the old school guys and I feel like I can touch base with them and stuff like that. I feel like that was one of the most interesting interviews because um we had Chris Jason had fought in Pancrase. Jason fought more than
Yeah.
50 times in Pancrase.
Well,
And
yeah.
he had met Chris Lytle there, and we had Chris with that podcast contact him by text and email and stuff like that. And Jason is at this point one of those guys where it's like, no, no, no. I need you to call me. I need to make sure that you're really Chris Lytle. You know what I mean? He wasn't a big social media guy or anything like that. And
I'm the
once
same way.
and once
I'm the same
we got him
way.
connected with Chris, he was down, and he was extremely insightful on the Japanese scene too. So that interview is gold. It's well worth watching.
I'm on to that. I'm on to that one for sure. Because that's a guy, he goes back way before UFC. Like he was doing this stuff,
Yeah,
man. And imagine the cojones it took. And he was a kid. He was
yeah,
like early.
he was doing challenge matches and fights in the Massachusetts area where he came from by the time he was 15 kind of thing. He was known for a reputation as being that kind of crazy tough guy. So
But you
Delucia,
look at him and you'd never think it. He looks like what's his face? Ralph Macchio from
yeah,
Karate Kid. That's
you
what he
know,
looked like back then.
handsome guy, fit, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so rugged. There's, if you could bottle
Hmm.
his toughness,
He
um,
fought Boss Rutan. He fought Minoru Suzuki. He fought
oh
Hoy's
yeah,
like, geez. And
oh
these
yeah,
are the
go.
warriors.
We went through every one of those fights with him. What do you remember about this fight? What do you remember about this
Oh,
fight? Go back and watch that interview. It's well
mhm.
worth it. But let's get back to the candidacy.
All
So
right. So
after,
IFC.
afterward, let's stick with UFC for a minute. After Hal
Okay.
Howard, the next guy that comes up is another East Coast guy, is Dave Beneteau. And Beneteau's actually turned down interviews, and he's a lawyer now. But Beneteau came from a
I know
wrestling
Beneteau good.
background. And Beneteau's a guy that may be different than Harold. I think he was a little younger. And you could see his progression in the UFC, whereas you see him the first time and you're like, okay, he was pretty good. I'd watch him again, kind of thing. And then
Hmm.
the next time he shows up much fitter, much more ready. But
Hmm.
competition was also going up and stuff like that, so things got
Good.
harder. But Bento was
Good.
the real deal, very serious
He
guy.
was a lot more disciplined because he had a wrestling background. He was a wrestler
Yeah.
who banged, who banged. And the town he was from is another border town like Niagara Falls, like Windsor is a crazy town, man, crazy town. And yeah, Beneteau did good. He was in an ultimate. He beat Joel Sutton, I believe. He knuckled his ass up, took him down to the ground. And remember, he just like holy shit. Like, wow, they're gonna think us Canadians are crazy, man. Yeah, Dave's cool. We struck up a good friendship. He was actually the main event of my very first show, man. He
Yeah.
fought
Who did
Elvis Sinisic.
That's what I was gonna say. It was a draw.
Oh, dude, you want to hear the fucking story about that?
Let's go to it. Let's skip ahead and we'll come back.
Where do you want me to go?
Let's talk about Elvis
Okay,
and
my very
Beneteau.
first show. Okay, this is after the IFC, June 2nd, 2000. I'm just a kid.
This is
So this is
UCC.
UCC 1.
Yep.
So this is years before any. So anyhow, the main event was going to be Chemo versus Christophe Midou.
Okay.
2 weeks before, 2 weeks before the fight, Christophe gets rear-ended in France. Not in a gay way, on the highway. I'm talking about. Got to be clear on that shit. It is France. So he's out. So I had to find someone. So with a week and a half before my very first show, June 2nd, 2000, I'm like, shit. So going back to the fighting list, the underground discussion forum, Elvis Sinisic was on it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I email, what's your number? He emails me his number and he don't know what's up. So I call him up, not knowing it's like 4 in the morning his time. So I'm like, hey, nice to finally speak to you. Yeah, I know it's a tall order, but you want to fight Chemo in a week and a half? Well, how the fuck could I say no, mate? He says, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, great. I draft up the paperwork and gave him decent money. Where are you flying out of? All the typical shit. Fax it over. Yes, I said fax. And around 6 hours later, I get a phone call at my wine store. So I'm bottling some old lady's wine and I'm putting together a wedding package. And there Elvis calls. So I'm like this, corking wine. He goes, I just had a really weird dream that you called me and offered me to fight Chemo. I'm like, no, that wasn't a dream, dude. And you accepted. And I've already written the press release. So Ain't no turning back now, motherfucker. So, okay, here's where it gets juicy. Okay, 2 days before, he's in flight with his corner. It's like an 18 or 20-hour flight or something like that. In the air, I get a call from Clint Dahl, Chemo's manager, who ended up being one of my partners with Freedom Fight. There's a little thing for you. That's how I met Clint. It's like, yeah, Chemo's out. He broke his right hand. I'm like, how do you break your right hand 2 days before a fight like this? Like, oh Jesus Christ, what am I gonna do? I'm a kid. I'm not as resourceful as we all become, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm flipping the F out, man. Flipping out. So I was cool with the Raw team back then. I actually own the Canadian rights to the Brazil Open '95, where Henderson debuted and Erickson's on it. So
Erickson
I
beat Randleman, and Henderson
yes,
won the tournament. Yep.
yes, that's right. So yeah, I was cool with Rico and Luke Chiparelli. Yeah, I wonder how those guys are doing. But yeah, anyhow, I was cool with them, so I
Hey,
called
you
them
know
up.
what? Side note: Rico Chiapparelli would be an interview to get, huh?
Yeah, Rico and Lou. Gotta get Lou in there because Rico was more the hands-on, Lou was more the business guy.
Okay.
That's where the name Pistol Pete come from. They liked the way I did business, so they all started calling me Pistol Pete. Anyhow, we're digressing. So I call them up. I'm like, yeah, I need someone to fight this kid, Elvis Sinisic. Or, oh, okay, we got Tom Erickson. He's available, good to
Cool.
go. 280-pound. Elvis was like 212. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
in the air, thinking he's flying to Montreal for my first show to fight Chemo. And yeah, so I did that. So this is how we thought back then, how I thought anyway. I said, I wouldn't want to get off a plane and be told who I'm fighting. I'm going to give him a choice. So I called up Windsor. I said, hey, Dave, Beneteau. That's how we got back into this, because of the Beneteau. I said, here's the deal. Here's the money, blah, blah, blah. And just like I told Erickson, I said, I want to give the man a choice. When he arrives, it's going to be like, oh, nice to finally meet you. Hug, hug, hug. Oh, yeah, okay. By the way, I felt like Dennis the freaking menace, you know? So I did. So I checked him into his hotel, picked him up at the airport. He doesn't know. He has no idea. No one knows. There's like 5,000 posters this big with Chemo all over. It was a nightmare. So I said, yeah, Elvis, here's the deal, man. You got three options, brother. I said, Chemo's out, which is a whole nother story. I'll get into the bullshit of that. But I said, you got three options. I said, Chemo's out. So you either got Tom Erickson, Dave Beneteau, or I will respect if you choose neither, and you're still getting your show money, and I'll have you a good time, and we'll dance again someday. I think that was the gentleman way to go about it.
That's class. That's definitely class. And the choice thing, to be honest with you, um, is rare. You know what I mean? It's like I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know how often I did that or anything like that. And I've got a lot
On
of
a day's
matchmaking and stuff.
notice, the guy
Yeah.
just flew for 20 hours. And there was a camaraderie too. It'd be like this guy I've been talking to for 3 years on the internet. I finally get to meet him, and now here I am being the fucking asshole that has to tell him that everything fell apart. So anyhow, so he goes up to his hotel room. 20 minutes later, he rings me. I go up, and he goes, "Okay, we'll fight Beneteau."
Yeah, I'll
I
tell
said,
you this. All due respect to Dave Banto, like I said, there was a point where you could tell he took it seriously. He got super fit between his first appearance and his other appearances, and you thought, okay, this guy is serious business. But I'd have picked Benetton. Erickson is a different beast.
"Oh, he in his prime,
Yeah,
Erickson could have been the
yeah.
real smashing machine. No disrespect to Kerr.
Well, if
He
you
had the
talk to Kerr,
discipline.
I've talked to Kerr, I've talked to Coleman, I've talked to guys of that level, and they
Mm-hmm.
all say Erickson is the 40-pound difference with that level of athleticism is very
Be
notable, and he's huge, much
huge,
bigger than those
man.
guys. And
So
he
he
you,
chooses Beneteau. Here's where it gets kind of funny. So I call up Dave on his 20-pound cell phones that we had back then. I call him up. I'm like, yeah, Elvis picked you. It's on. Give me your information and I'll book you a flight. He goes, oh, I knew Elvis was going to pick me. I'm already in Montreal. I used my air miles. I figured you had enough shit on your plate.
Hey, you showed class with giving Elvis the choice, and Beneto's a classy guy too for doing that. That's cool.
Oh my
That's
God.
cool.
And then we show up and he's sitting out front there smoking. Oh, anyhow, yeah, it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. And then yeah, so the fight happens and Beneteau basically took him down, put him on his back, and couldn't do anything because of Elvis's jujitsu. And that went on for 20 minutes. And the fight was so boring that the only people that actually saw that fight were the 2,218 people that were at my very first show. I deleted it from all the TSN, from everything, DVDs. No, so after all of that, just
we live in a world where you got to sell DVDs or how to sell DVDs, and even nowadays people want to bang and stuff like that. But as a historical match, I would love to watch that.
I'll
I
see if
really
I
would
can
love.
dig it up. I'll see
I
if I can
really would
dig it
love to
up.
watch that, because even when people consider things boring by certain standards,
Mm-hmm.
there's the stalemate between two high level athletes like that might be something that's interesting. Maybe they did nothing, and
Maybe if I watch it with that with your optimism, I
hey,
might enjoy it. At
hey,
the
why don't
time,
we
I
do
was
this?
like,
Let's do this. Let's watch it on Classic Fights.
let me find it. I might
Okay,
only have a camcorder of it.
doesn't
I
matter.
might only have
Let's
that.
watch it on Classic Fights, and
Oh,
we will let the fans know that it might not live up to expectations or be a truly classic fight in certain respects. But in terms of name value and also this backstory that you're telling and stuff like that,
it
there
was the main event of the first legal MMA event in Canada.
and
Because after
so
the whole IFC thing, we broke off from Mike Thomas. So Stefan Patry messaged me. Now we're kind of flipping
now,
backwards a little bit.
but
6 months before that was our
but
last show.
let me ask you, how does this IFC relate to the IFC that did the show in Belarus, or I'm sorry, in
Yeah,
Ukraine and stuff like
yeah,
that? Yeah, so it was
same,
Ukraine. So
same
okay,
company.
so it's
Mike
okay.
Thomas owned it. Mike Thomas owned it, and a guy named he was an alright guy, a big dude, big blonde guy from California, Paul.
Yeah,
Paul, what was his name?
I'm with you. I'll get it here.
Yeah,
But
big,
okay,
yeah. But anyhow, same company, man. Yeah.
okay, unbelievable. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I actually
those
saw the canvas that was painted because I guess in Kiev there's a some kind of nonprofit or a group for children or something like that that's called the IFC. So when they arrived and set that up, they said, no, you can't film that with the IFC logo. So they made them spray paint or something. If you watch that one, that was the one Igor Volchench and Joe Dixon, John Dixon,
Paul
Paul
Varlins.
Garland. Yeah, yeah, he was a cool cat, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, Wolfchenchen was prime Wolfchenchen then. But you watch that event, the IFC logo is blacked out. That's why. And I've actually seen that canvas. I've walked on that canvas. It was in Kanawaki. So yeah, no. Mike Thomas owned the IFC with Paul. Oh, that's gonna drive me crazy. And you're googling the heck out of that right now,
yeah.
aren't you?
I'm looking now, and I'm not doing a great job yet, but I'll get it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that was the IFC, and they did a Battleground 2000, 99, 98. It was around 97 when they were still really small. That's when I got involved, and I got to be friends with the manager of all the Quebec guys that our guys used to beat on. That's
Sure.
what happened, right? And the guy's name was Stefan Patrick. So we had a friendly rivalry. I liked the guy. He was all right, you know.
Yeah. Now
And
Stefan became a bit of an iconic guy. Also, definitely more of a businessman than a fighter type of person. So some people may not have respected. He definitely took us to a new level and stuff like that in many different ways. What was your opinion of him? Because he was around for a long time.
Yeah. Oh God, as long as me. Like I knew him when, like I would say, oh yeah, because you got this guy, this Quebec guy fighting. Oh, too bad he's gonna get his ass kicked. Ha ha ha. And then we'd go out for drinks after. So there was something, and again, I don't want to speak ill of Mike Thomas because we've become cool and I've seen him since, but let's just say there were some shenanigans that neither of us were pleased with. We'll leave it at that.
Well,
So
I'll tell you a story of where Steph and I were very different into business because it was technically, setting up shows, doing matchmaking and stuff like that. We sort of dabbled in the same world. Um, I was getting to be backed by good people and I was getting to make bigger fights. And I went ahead and booked, I believe, Ivan Menjivar to fight Shaolin Ribeiro
wow.
in Florida.
Ooh.
And this is one of those things where I on a philosophical level, I have to disagree with Stefan, but Ivan showed up with Stefan as his corner man, and that's where that Stefan was probably grabbing 20% of Ivan's money, and he wasn't making big money. This was not big money stuff yet. It was
No.
still proving yourselves, kind of thing.
But I heard Steph can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. He ain't no
Right,
trainer.
right. So
Yeah.
that's where you kind of he gets that role of a middleman, where it's like,
Yes.
some people will be offended by him, whereas like whereas you know, I think I might be able to beat Stefan up, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to rank way up there among the fighters in the business either. You know what I mean? But
See, I
I
roll with anyone. I've rolled with Matt Hughes, Horn, David Loiseau. I
I
don't care.
roll with people. I've had a lot of fun. I remember probably the last time I got choked out was by Eric Paulson. So
No shame in that,
no,
brother.
yeah, but it's for fun. I have no ego.
That's
Like
how
I'm
you
gonna
learn.
like you're never gonna be like I'm gonna beat Eric Paulson. So I don't have an ego that way, but I respect the fighters enough that I won't take their money. And
Hmm.
Stefan did do that, and I think that that's one of the differences because the other part about Stefan that may have affected you when you were doing business with him is that Stefan got himself behind a lot of the time. So it would be like you'd be fighting on UFC or on UCC 9 and getting your pay for the fight on UCC 8. And he'd be making promises on how he's going to pay you later and
That was
all that.
all TKO. That was once I left. I was with him for UCC 1 through 12. The last
Okay.
one I did was when Pulver came up to fight Dwayne Ludwig.
Okay. Okay.
That was
So
hard to
talk about,
watch.
is that why you left? Because some of those, like Stefan did always make good on his promises. He paid the guys even if it was late and stuff like that. He's not one of those guys that just disappeared kind of thing. So
Oh, you had to, and again, I when I left, it was pretty nasty. I was ready to go old school New York, and I didn't.
okay,
And I started my own thing, and he kept going with his thing, and it is what it is. But then several years later, I found out he had some health issues. I won't, it's not my business to disclose that, but it was serious enough that it warranted me make a phone call to him. And I
okay,
said, Stefan, I said, and he apologized for what he did. And I said, oh, I apologize for wanting to throw you down a flight of stairs. I guess we're good now, right? And I said, you know what? How about we just focus on the fact that we were two 22-year-old kids and he came and sat at my table at the home dojo where I live, Fluta, Ontario, and we had a black book, and I still have it. And we designed the first logo. We did the first budget. Our first show was like 79 grand. 79 grand. Like,
hey,
Jesus Christ.
that's not a small show for those days for sure.
Oh, yeah, but that was my lighting budget. So my last few shows, it's like, damn. But I said, why don't we just celebrate what we accomplished together? we're two very different people. I'm a family guy. I'm more worldly, and we handle people very differently to the point where fighters would call, he would answer, "Oh, can you put Pete on the phone, please?" And he's all, I remember he asked me one day, he goes, "How come nobody wants to talk to me?" I said, "Steph, I know your good side, but I said, throughout the world, you're known as the French prick." "Well, what does that mean?" He didn't know that term. I said, "Steph," I said, "for instance, when you call my house and my wife at the time answers, you say, 'Hello, Terry. How are you? Would Pete happen to be there? I'd like to speak to him.' He would call, she would answer the phone, 'Pete, please.'" I said, "That's not acceptable in the rest of the world. Like you have to talk like a fucking gentleman, you know?"
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's neither here or there.
No,
So
no, no. He's got look, he's got an indelible place in history, MMA history, Canadian history. Since we got to the UCC now, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit.
absolutely. As far as a promoter, I'll just finish on the Steph thing with this. As a promoter, as somebody who's tireless and goes in there and takes ideas and sort of lit a candle under my ass to put my nuts on the chopping block the way we did back in the day. Um, I learned a lot of what to do, and I learned a lot about what not to do from working with Stefan. And I'm glad that we're cool because what we accomplished together, we took the UCC from a little show, and it's one point we were like the third largest thing in the world, man. Like it was crazy how big the UCC. And I said, let's
And one of the reasons for that was because you guys got, even in 2000, you guys, and like you said, you were probably the third biggest show in the world at one point. I agree with that. One of the things you guys did was you lit a fire under the Canadian fans, and the Canadian fans, 5 years later, actually were probably carrying the UFC during the St.
oh
Pierre
yeah,
area and stuff like that. But one of the first things you guys did was guys like was it Steven Vigneault? Who was the boxer guy? You guys had boxer guy because
Donald we
Montreal,
met,
yeah,
the boxers, yeah, Donald we met. But the thing was, they had the TriStar gym.
yeah, but that
And
boxing in Montreal is major. Like
right, bro,
people,
yeah,
people don't understand that there's,
they do not,
is a
they do not
legit,
understand.
there's a
But what?
legit, unbelievable boxing scene in Montreal, and you
Yeah.
guys did, and boxing at that point, they don't respect MMA too much now. You know what I mean? It's like they may look at it for the money or whatever. But in 2000, to try to talk a boxer into doing MMA, they looked down your nose on you. But you guys pulled it off on several different occasions
We got
with
them all.
big,
We had
with
the first top 10 ranked pro boxer to fight in MMA, UCC 6, Stefan Ouellet,
mhm.
the godson of all Quebecers. The guy was a freaking whack job, man. I saw my buddy slap him in the face with his flip flop. It was funny on live TV. Welcome to MMA, motherfucker. Yeah, he fought Payne Peters and got himself disqualified with headbutts, and yeah, the guy was an idiot. But yeah, we had great guys like Donald. We met was probably the most of a boxer that we
Yeah.
had, and he was our champion. He fought Claudio Fontanelli from Brazil. That was a interesting fight.
I judged the Claudio Nor fight for Sergio in Brazil that he ended rushing a guy into the corner with headbutts.
Yep, yep, yep. He was a maniac. He was a maniac, but he was another one. I could tell you a story. He come up and he was fighting Sean Shirk on our show. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hello.
at least they both look alike. They're ripped.
Yeah, that was a punishment. That was
But
a
that but
punishment.
that's good matchmaking though. In terms of, if you got a guy
Yeah.
like Shirk, you you're you're going to struggle to get a guy his level. But
Mhm,
if
mhm.
you get a guy who looks the part, you've done a certain portion of your job. So, and then
We
Claudio
made a
Noir is not a
star.
joke, but
Yeah, well, we made a star. Stefan and I were looking through the tapes that Sergio got us because we have the Canadian rights to IVC 1 through 13. And we continuously see this Claudio Nor. I'm like, and then I see that fight. So it's funny that you were a judge on the fight that made us decide to make him into a Canadian star. That was the fight. So I looked at Stefan, and we're like two little kids watching WrestleMania when we were 8. You know what I mean? And we both come from being a pro wrestling fans as kids, so we understand the psychology. That's what made the UCC. That's what he turned to TKO, Freedom Fight MMA. We created characters, right? So I said, this guy's freaking Demolition Man. Next thing you know, he's on every poster. The Demolition Man, Claudio Fontanelli, and yeah, me and him almost went at it, eh?
Yeah, he, if I remember correctly, he later got arrested for like stealing it, on a moped. He drive into
pharmacy. He robbed a pharmacy.
So
yeah, I like him. And again, we've made amends, but no, he tried to what's it called? Strong arm me at the weigh-ins with Sean Shirt. He was we were giving him like 3 + 3, which $3,000 + $3,000 back then was decent money.
And in Brazil, it's double the money.
Oh, he lived like a king. He could buy a whole beach down there. So he comes up, his manager guy in suit and tie with an empty briefcase, he goes, oh yeah, Claudio Nor said, no fight unless this, and he points 6 + 6. I said, well, it's already signed. So I said, give me a sec. So I went and talked to Stefan. He starts freaking out and crying and blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh, you handle it. I'm scared. So, okay, cool. Fuck it. I'll handle it. So I go sit down and I got the guy. I said, I need you to translate to Portuguese. So I reached in my briefcase, took out his plane ticket. And I looked at Claudianor and I said, it's a long walk back to Brazil.
Nice. Yeah, they gotta learn.
Me fight.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so UCC, what were we going at before we got sidetracked?
We've been all over the place on UCC, but we were at UCC 1. Take us from, because a lot of people, you have your main event fall apart. You got to replace chemo. You did the right thing and stuff like that. But a lot of people, to be honest, you get left holding your dick in your hand. You've been advertising chemo. You didn't deliver chemo. You may have probably lost money on the show. What takes you to UFC or UCC 2?
Being psychotic. It's just, it's we had something to prove, man. We got dicked around by an older dude, and we wanted to do legal shows so that a certain person that dicked us around would never. We wanted to drive him out of the country. That was the goal. That was the goal. We wanted to make sure fighters had a fair place and a safe place to compete. We wanted promoters to be able to do it and make money. We wanted the fans to get what they deserve. And we were both huge fans. Like Stefan was a huge fan. I was a huge fan. Like when we were going through those IBCs, scouting fighters and editing it and stuff, we were like two little kids, man. Like people don't know. Like before things got big and Stefan, he changed a little bit for a while. I'll always value that time when we sat at a table and we drew that first logo that is like cringeworthy. I don't know if you saw the first UCC logo. Looks like a goddamn Ninja Turtle, and we were so proud of it. And now I look at it, I'm like, holy shit, the hash was good back then.
I think me and you and Stefan and Jeff, we've got a common ground there where it's like that passion. I remember, we would have, we always joked around about our cameraman Randy. He was our go-to camera guy, a great guy, but like, kind of an oddball kind of guy, a loner kind of guy. But you could always count on him to do great camera work, And Jeff's at the shows, and I'm dealing with the fighters and things like that. And then you go back to the editing room. And I remember, Jeff used to do commentary, and he's a great commentator. He was the UFC commentator before Joe Rogan, for whatever that's worth. And I remember him sitting in the editing room by himself in total silence in the studio in his house going, I can barely hear myself above the crowd. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just crazy little touches where it's like, What
Well,
crowd
if
are
he
you talking?
raised his voice a little bit, maybe.
You know, it's like I love those early experiences where it's like what the fans got to see. Even then, you had to, really do a lot of work to do. Now,
Yes.
you talked about we've been talking about the Canadian fans' passion and how UCC started to stoke that fire, and I guess the pinnacle of that is George St. Pierre, and he did appear on those shows. Why don't you talk about meeting George and the first time you booked him and all that sort of stuff?
First time I met George, he was 14 or 15 years old. And it was actually at the show where Stefan and I were starting to learn our craft. It was UCC 3, which we called Battle for the Belts. How cliche, but it was the first title belts in Canada. And I think before UFC had the super fight thing that they gifted to Shamrock. Um, yeah, so we were in a town called Sherbrooke, which is around 2.5, 3 hours outside of Montreal. So right in Poutineville, very French. So
Sure.
anyhow, we're there, and it was a very successful show, very exciting.
It
David
was
Loiseau.
Paul Smith, right, with the IFC.
Oh man, that would have come to me at like 3 in the morning. I would have called you up and woke you up. Paul Smith, yes, thank you. Now I can sleep tonight. So yeah, so I'm at an intermission or something like that. Actually, no, I found out that someone with a wheelchair had a seat in the bleachers and they couldn't see because there was a big pillar in the way. And I'm like, shit, no, not at my show, man. So I went up, I said, yeah, you guys here? I said, this is not acceptable. And they're looking at me confused. I said, come with me. And I wheeled him down onto the floor and put him in front of like where the commission is, the fucking VIP. So I'm doing that. I'm wheeling this dude in a wheelchair to give him a better experience at my third show. And this dad comes up with this little geeky kid with a bowl haircut, looking like, the fucking Dorothy Hamill hair that we all had in the 70s. Oh, what was mom thinking? And it was George and his dad. So George was too shy and too scared of me to introduce himself. So his dad comes up and he spoke broken, we call it Fringlish up here. And hello, this is my son, and this is what he does, and he's competing jujitsu and kickbox, and this is what he wants to do. And so I shook George's hand. I said, "Good for you, kid." I said, "You know what? You keep that up. And here's my suggestion: is to train here, train here." I said, "You're doing everything great. I'd love to see you compete." And he shakes my hand, and the only English he could come up with, he goes, "Oh, Mr. Rodley, I would like to be one of your warriors." That's all he knew how to say. I said, "Well, do your thing and call me when you're 18, kid."
That
And he,
that Warriors, he says that hasn't changed much, even to this day. So let me ask you a question. You've been around. You've got an eye for talent.
Mhm.
Some of us miss people's, but was there any sign that this guy was going to be what he was?
Instantly, instantly. Not then, like he was still a tadpole. You know what I mean? He was like a little kid. But some guy's trying to get in the business center. Get the fuck out of here. We're talking about important shit real fast. Yeah, like he was just a kid, right? But his first fight was actually against Ivan Menjivar. Did you know that?
Okay, and
Yeah,
look, Menjivar is a Nicaraguan kid
El
who's,
Salvador.
or else I mean, from Central America. Absolutely no joke, and very serious. Probably legitimately 145 pounder, but still
Oh, yeah, but there was
absolutely.
no 145 back
Yeah,
then.
yeah, exactly. So he was
He was
fighting
fighting
155,
170.
170, and absolutely a serious guy. If you can beat Ivan Menjivar
Mm-hmm.
in your first fight, you've set a. So I think you're right. You say instantly. Okay, that's a good
It
sign because
wasn't because he beat him, because how he won that fight was absolute bullshit, to be honest with you. There was the whole language barrier, right? And the referee didn't quite understand, blah, blah, blah. So George was on top in Ivan's guard, and this is all on. You could look this fight up, and he was taking a few and blah blah blah. And the referee asked, are you okay? And he looked at the ref and said, no. He said, do you want us to stop it? And Ivan looked at him and said, no, I am fine. And the referee misinterpreted that he verbally tapped and stopped the fight. That's how that fight ended. And both of them will tell you the same thing. Yeah, but in that fight, though, his composure, just
no. If you're not serious, if you're not a serious dude, Ivan Menjivar will wipe you out. There's no. I can say that unequivocally. I put him in with Shaolin.
One of the top tier guys that the UCC had, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Stefan was smart. He took the ethnic thing and he called him the pride of El Salvador. That was his nickname.
And he took 20% of his money for future fights. But
20? You're funny.
Oh, it might be more. That's sad.
But I don't even want to. Don't even want to get into that. But Ivan,
like you said,
one hell of a dancer too, man. You go to the after parties. Anyone who thought they were getting chicks back then, you better hope Ivan wasn't in the room with his dancing. Oh yeah, man. My Latino would come out, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's definitely cool. Now, let me ask you. Let's talk about another one of those guys, because you guys definitely the thing that made the UCC to me as a watchable show, as a rival show, even at the time, was that I was always looking for international talent. And you guys also pulled in international talent. There were very few shows that were achieving that kind of thing. More guys, the local guy kind of, Wander Braga.
Who?
Wander Braga. What was that guy's name? He's a jiu-jitsu guy. I'll get his name here. Give me a second here. No, I think I'm
you're talking about Wagner Fabiano.
Yes, Wagner Fabiano.
Santos' brother.
Yeah,
he fought on my the very first show. He fought Ali
that's
Nestor.
why on the first show to get guys like that. I'm sorry, Wander Braga is a different name, but Wagner Fabiano is a guy.
Sean Tompkins fought on that first show.
You got Sean Tompkins beat.
What?
He lost, right?
He lost all 5 fights in the UCC.
Yeah.
Every one of his MMA fights. And it just goes to show you, man, some people are born to compete and some people are born to train. And he ended up going from this guy getting his ass kicked. But the thing is, the people he got his ass kicked from, Steve Vigneault, David Loiseau, fucking who else did he fight from the yeah, there was all top guys like that, right?
For sure.
So,
he was a guy that and we've repeated this a few times because we're old school guys. He's the guy who's no longer with us either. And that's, was certainly a loss to MMA. But
man.
He was a guy that had a talent for teaching more than actually in the ring. And
bang on. Yeah, for sure. I met him backstage at an IFC.
Talk about that whole thing, because then there was Tompkins' team, which produced Sam Stout and
Mark Hominick.
Hominick, Canadian legends. That was the next level of things.
It all started in the UCC. Mark Hominick debuted in God, I don't remember what year, but it was UCC 10 in Gatineau, where actually I did my most successful freedom fight MMA events. Same arena, Robert Gerten Arena. And he was brought in to fight Monkey Nanku. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, Tompkins, and who's he going to train? Ha, ha, ha. I'm like, no, Tompkins is a good trainer. Like, you better take this seriously. And no one knew who Mark Hominick was. And I met him, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the guy looked so slight, just a little bald kid, and hi, Mr. Rodley, how are you?
And he had that baby face, you know what I mean?
He still does. Have you seen pictures of him with the kids? Yeah. It's like he still does. But what a gentleman, and a true warrior. And everyone that came out of Tompkins, man, they were all killers, man. And when he went in there and beat Richie so bad that he puked in the freaking ring, man.
Wow.
Oh yeah, beat Nanku that bad. I was like, wow.
And
I was like,
I remember getting told about Sean Tompkins by Boss Rutan, because
and that's how I met Boss Rutan. I got introduced
Sean spent,
through Sean.
Sean had an eye for things. Obviously, Boss, the elite of the elite. You want to learn from him, and and you could almost use the word stalker for for his how he approached Boss and stuff like that. But he spent time under Boss Rutan and stuff like that, and learned a great deal. So there's a huge amount of respect that people still have in the community for Sean every time his name comes up.
Definitely, that was a shame, but it was should be a lesson to us all. Because back in the day, it was the Wild West, man, and we were a bunch of maniacs. And I remember sitting next
and
to
he's a
Mark.
guy, and he's a guy, not to speak bad about someone who's gone, but he burnt the candle at both ends too.
Oh yeah, and you know what? We all did. We all did. I don't know how it was down there, but it was like backstage at ECW back then. Like it was fucking insane, man. Insane.
Hey,
I remember.
People remember me. I've covered a few bar tabs.
Yo, oh yeah, man. I remember when Brandon Lee Hinkle came up with Coleman to UCC 2. They flew up, just come check it out. So I was like, all right. So I rented them a Camaro. And I remember at the hotel, Coleman, what do you guys call it up here? A 40-pounder? I'm like, oh, you want a 40? Yeah. It's like a 40-ounce bottle. So they hop in this Camaro, grab a 40-pounder. That's what they call it up here, of Jack and one of Jagger. And both bottles were gone by the time they got to the arena.
Nice.
And I'm sitting next to Coleman, and he's got a stack of beer cups. As you drink them, you stack them, and the freaking things like this high.
Oh yeah, I know. I know those guys. I'll tell you an interesting Hinkle Coleman story. So this was the time when Henry went to fight Rafael Cordero. So we're in the hotel room, and we're going from Sao Paulo to Aracaju. So we're in Sao Paulo for an overnight, and then we're getting on another plane the next night. And I get a phone call from Coleman. He goes, I need you to translate how to get back to our hotel room to this cab driver. And I'm like, man, I speak Spanish. It's not Portuguese. He goes,
very different.
You don't understand. These girls have got to get here. And the bottom line is that Brandon Lee Hinkle is still married to that girl today. They've had kids and everything.
No kidding. He's with
yeah, he's with she was beautiful back then. She's beautiful now.
Oh, white bread got a Latino. Look at him.
And I'll tell you what's interesting is I remember, since we're being honest, I remember him at the airport on our way out, holding hands with his future wife now, holding hands with her and going to me, I'm staying, I'm not going. He's not going to get on the plane. I'm like, Papa Miguel, it's like, fuck, what are we going to do? Henry was blowing bubbles out of his chin from headbutts. I got problems, and now Hinkle's not coming on the plane. And he's like, no, I'm staying with this girl. So the truth is I pulled out probably 3 grams of weed I had left in my wallet and gave him to him.
Yeah, but who doesn't have a Brazil story like that, man? Last time I went to Brazil, I lost track of the days because I ended up meeting these jungle people, and they had a what's that stuff called? It's like a tea, sort of like peyote.
Okay.
Out of ayahuasca or some shit.
Okay,
like that.
ayahuasca. See, oh wow, that'll change your life.
Oh, dude, they were like, "Yeah, do you have experience?" And everyone in the room's like, hey, "You have no idea. Like, whatever you would take, give a 300-pound man, give 5 times the amount to Rodley." So he did. So anyhow, everyone leaves. I'm gone. I'm on an adventure. I'm elsewhere. Oh, my battery's at 15%. Okay. So so I end up coming out of the bush 5 days later. I go to the airport, get cleaned up, and they're like, "You realize you're on the missing persons list in 3 countries?" Sorry.
I mean, Brazil had that edge. What we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and start to cut it short a little bit. We'll do a part 2 in the future to just go
Yeah,
into,
man.
because we haven't even gotten too far into the history of real stuff. But great stories. And next time I'll tell you about the 6-toed girl in Brazil.
I might have been there. I might have been there. But yeah,
and,
let's nail some more history. I got 15% left on my thing, and then I gotta go get a bite to eat. I'm starving like Marvin.
for
Fat
sure,
bastard.
and I
Yeah.
don't want to abuse too long. It's been a great interview because we've me and you have a good camaraderie.
Yeah,
We
man.
talk. We're having a lot of fun, and we're also bringing up real serious old school business and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So talk about why the UCC changed to TKO. What was, and I know you left, but there was also some business shenanigans there.
It was bad. It was bad, man. After the Ludwig thing, and it was a lot. Pretty much every time my phone rang, I was putting out a fire created by someone else. I don't want to get into who, you know who I'm talking about. And I just got sick of it. So I called him up. I said, "Yeah, draw up the paperwork. You're going to purchase my shares in the UCC. I'm fucking done." I said, "I'm not doing it." I didn't even go to my last show of UCC. I didn't even attend it. Didn't even go. It was that bad. And I just got sick of it. I'm like, yo, I'm an honorable man. You know, I don't have a wealth of experience at the time, but I have enough growing up in New York. If you don't have respect, you ain't got nothing. And that's how I always ran my life, my business, my family, my friendships. So I said, yeah, I'm out. So I was out of that. And then within 6 months, yeah, well, okay. So why it changed to TKO? Basically, shit got that bad that he had to change the name, and there were other people involved, and after that, I basically didn't talk to him, or I wasn't around the Montreal scene for forever. Really, I didn't talk to him until I found out he had a very bad illness, and I wanted to extend good vibes. You know, that's the only reason I called him as a gentleman, former friend. Um, yeah, I really don't know. I know
Well,
I've heard a
how'd
lot
that
of.
conversation go with Stefan? Because Stefan could be, standoffish or businesslike and stuff like that. Was he receptive to what you were
Not with
trying to do?
me, not with me, because he knows I'll be like, yo, you know what I mean? Like he knows I don't mess around. No, he appreciated the call and we laughed a lot, and we he agreed that we're two very different people. Like we're from two very different things. I had 3 kids and a wife. He didn't, so he never understood why I skipped the after party and wanted to take my kids whitewater rafting the next day, after the show, or why I wasn't staying and why I didn't live in Montreal. It's like, well, two very different people. So, but I said to him, I said, we need to celebrate what we did. You think about that. We each pulled 40 grand out of our asses as kids and created this thing, not knowing our ass from our elbow, what we were doing. We were just motivated to create something, and we did. And we created something totally different that spawned. Like these kids that are fighting now in Canada, they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for what we did. And they
For
don't even
sure.
know, they don't even know. Like I'm scared out of my mind. I'm going June 14th, I'm going to Unified MMA. I was offered passes by the promoter, seems like a nice guy. I don't even think he truly knows who the hell I am. I'm looking at the fight card. I don't recognize one name. I'm contacting all my people that used to fight that are now training people. None of them are going, and I'm scared out of my mind. I'm bringing
No,
someone
no.
down.
Here's my advice, and I had to deal a little bit with that when I moved down to Costa Rica because they asked me to do a show. And we did 15 shows down here in Costa Rica under the name Fight Night. And
Oh,
I had no cred
you
with the
know what?
fighter.
I'm gonna walk to my room. Hopefully, I don't lose you
Yep.
because I'm
No.
at like 2% battery. Give me a
Okay.
second there.
No, let's do this, brother. Let's catch up. we'll text each
No,
other
I'm
and stuff
still
like
here.
that.
Just gotta plug it in.
I was just saying, you know, with the fight night stuff, the fighters here, I had no cred. And you know what?
Yeah, and that's hard from what we were used to, right?
Yeah, but you know what? It won't take you seconds before they realize, hey, they're dealing with an OG. That's the fucking bottom line, brother.
Yeah, hold on one sec. Where's my charger? Run, Pete, run. Look like a bachelor pad in here. Fucking pizza boxes, gummy bears. Jesus Christ.
Stiletto heels.
No, shh. Jesus Christ. What are you doing? No, none of that, man. I'm not from that part of New York. Jesus.
No, not and they're not yours.
Yeah, I
No,
know.
no,
I
but
know,
hey,
bro.
so listen, brother, we've been going about an hour and a half, which is a good
Oh,
interview.
wow.
And
Okay.
and for sure we could go another hour and a half more if things wound
Let's
up.
do
And
it.
let's do it for a part 2 next week or whenever. And I'm gonna publish this for real fast because for Canadian MMA, I think we've documented a lot of really important stories, just cold stuff.